So another question that I get asked often, and it is another myth of Jesus's birth, is the idea of the wise men. The Greek word is magi. They were probably stargazers, occultists, maybe even magicians from the area, probably around Babylon in that area, from the east, definitely. When they traveled back in those days, they traveled in caravans. And that's why when you read Matthew 2, it says all of Jerusalem was sort of like trying to figure out what was going on. And the reason it would have been that way is because hundreds of these magi would have shown up at Jerusalem looking for the King of the Jews. They probably had material that had been left over from the Babylonian captivity, which Daniel, when we read the book of Daniel, we know that Daniel was there and they were there for 70 years. Probably a lot of the texts and stories that the Jewish people told stayed in that area. And that's how these astronomers, occultists, magicians, the Magi, would have known that, hey, there might have been a king being born. They might have even had Daniel 9 and done some work on that and figured out some time frames where that would have happened. But they traveled and probably took them several months to get to where they were traveling from, and they may have taken several months or 6 months or a year or whatever before they actually came. But the bottom line is that the wise men show up much later than the story of the shepherds, which the shepherds show up at the birth of Jesus. The Magi do not show up, or the wise men do not show up at Jesus's birth. They show up when he's probably somewhere around a year and a half or 2 years old. That's why Herod, when he asks about the time that they saw the star, gathers that he needs to kill the kids 2 years and younger, because he knows that Jesus is a child at this point. The three wise men is a myth. I don't think anybody meant to try to hurt anybody by saying that. I think that comes from the fact that they offered gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And so they see that and they go, oh, that must have been the three gifts. So there must have been three magi, three wise men. That's not true. There would have been a band of wise men, probably several hundred, because you couldn't travel across the desert and travel from where they came from to Jerusalem with three people with a bunch of treasure. They'd have been killed and robbed, and we'd have never heard of them. So they traveled in a large band. They would have shown up, and they showed up probably when Jesus was a young boy, and they gave him the gifts. And so hopefully that helps a little bit to understand sort of how that works. The shepherds come at Jesus's birth. The wise men come at a later time. And actually in the text of Matthew, it says they came and saw Jesus in the house. He was actually, they'd moved into a house and things were different. And Jesus was probably somewhere between, let's say, a year and a half, 2 years old when the Magi came.